In the attitude which we nowadays characterize as cynical, it seems to me decisive that here too no higher differences in values exist and that, in general, the only significance of what is highly valued consists in its being degraded to the lowest level, but that the positive and ideal moral purpose of this leveling has disappeared. What was a means, or a secondary result, for those paradoxical adherents to Socratic wisdom is not central and in the process has completely altered its meaning. The nature of the cynic, in the contemporary sense, is most clearly demonstrated in contrast with that of the sanguine enthusiast. Whereas the curve of evaluation of the enthusiast moves upwards and lower values strive to be raised to the importance of higher values, the evaluation curve of the cynic moves in the opposite direction. His awareness of life is adequately expressed only when he has theoretically and practically exemplified the baseness of the highest values and the illusion of any differences in values. This mood can be most effectively supported by money's capacity to reduce the highest as well as the lowest values equally to one value form and thereby to place them on the same level, regardless of their diverse kinds and amounts. Nowhere else does the cynic find so triumphant a justification as here, where the finest, most ideal and most personal goods are available not only for anyone who has the necessary money, but even, more significantly, where these goods are denied to the most worthy if he lacks the necessary means, and where the movements of money bring about the most absurd combinations of personal and objective values. The nurseries of cynicism are therefore those places with huge turnovers, exemplified in stock exchange dealings, where money is available in huge quantities and changes owners easily. The more money becomes the sole center of interest, the more one discovers that honor and conviction, talent and virtue, beauty and salvation of the soul, are exchanged against money, and so the more a mocking and frivolous attitude will develop in relation to these higher values that are for sale for the same kind of value as groceries, and that also command a market price. The concept of a market price for values which, according to their nature, reject any evaluation except in terms of their own categories and ideals is the perfect objectification of what cynicism presents in the form of a subjective reflex. The blasé attitude, the other meaning of leveling, which refers to the differences in the nature of things rather than to their different evaluation, inasmuch as the central position of money focuses interest on what things have in common rather than on their particular level of development, finds its personal expression in the blasé attitude. Whereas the cynic is still moved to a reaction by the sphere of value, even if in the perverse sense that he considers the downward movement of values part of the attraction of life, the blasé person, although the concept of such a person is rarely fully realized, has completely lost the feeling for value differences. He experiences all things as being of an equally dull and gray hue, as not worth getting excited about, particularly where the will is concerned. The decisive moment here, and one that is denied to the blasé, is not the devaluation of things as such, but indifference to their specific qualities from which the whole liveliness of feeling and volition originates. Whoever has become possessed by the fact that the same amount of money can procure all the possibilities that life has to offer must also become blasé. As a rule, the blasé attitude is rightly attributed to satiated enjoyment because too strong a stimulus destroys the nervous ability to respond to it. Yet this does not yet close the circle of phenomena associated with the blasé attitude. The attraction of things is not the only cause of practical activity intent on gaining them. On the contrary, the kind and amount of practically necessary endeavors to acquire them often determines the depth and liveliness of their attraction for us. All individual particular strivings, all the tortuous turns on the way, and all specific demands that the acquisition of the object imposes upon us, all are transferred to the object itself as particular qualities of its nature and its relation to us, and all are invested in the object as its fascination. In the opposite instance, the more the acquisition is carried out in a mechanical and indifferent way, the more the object appears to be colorless and without interest, just as everywhere it is the case that not only does the goal determine the way, but also the way determines the goal. Therefore their acquisition by money, which equalizes procurement and does not reserve specific methods for any object, makes the objects necessarily more indifferent. This is all the more the case where more and more objects are encompassed by wealth and their value differences are actually reduced. As long as we are not yet in a position to buy things, they affect us with their particular distinctive charms. Yet as soon as we easily acquire them with our money, those charms fade away, not only because we now own and enjoy them, but also because we acquired them by an indifferent method which effaces their specific value. This influence is, of course, almost unnoticeable in individual cases. But in the relationship of the wealthy person to the objects acquired by money, indeed, even in the total coloring which the public mind now attributes to these objects, this influence has grown considerably. Thus, cynicism and the blasé attitude are the answers to two different, sometimes to some extent mixed, natural dispositions to the same state of affairs. For the cynical disposition, the experience of how much can be obtained for money and the inductive conclusion that finally everything and everybody is purchasable excites a definite pleasurable sensation, whereas the same picture of reality viewed from a blasé attitude destroys all possibilities of being attractive. While, as a rule, the cynic does not wish to change his inner condition, the reverse is often the case for the blasé person. His membership of the human species demands the attractions of life that his individual condition makes intangible for him. Out of this, there emerges the craving today for excitement, for extreme impressions, for the greatest speed in its change. It is one of the typical attempts to meet the dangers or sufferings in a situation by the quantitative exaggeration of its content. The satisfaction of such cravings may bring about a temporary relief, but soon the former condition will be re-established, though now made worse by the increased quantity of its elements. What is more important is that the modern preference for stimulation as such in impressions, relations, and information, without thinking it important for us to find out why these stimulate us, also reveals the characteristic entanglement with means. One is satisfied with this preliminary stage of the genuine production values. The search for mere stimuli in themselves is the consequence of the increasing blasé attitude through which natural excitement increasingly disappears. This search for stimuli originates in the money economy with the fading of all specific values into a mere mediating value. We have here one of those interesting cases in which the disease determines its own form of the cure. A money culture signifies such an enslavement of life in its means, that release from its weariness is also evidently sought in a mere means which conceals its final significance, in the fact of stimulation as such. I have mentioned before that greed and avarice, although they appear in most cases in unison, must nonetheless be precisely distinguished both conceptually as well as psychologically.